Hey guys, and welcome to a new guide. Today we're going to be going over kind of the introduction and first steps of getting into the magic combat style. So to start is, the benefits of magic is the fact that you have access to animate dead and tank armor or your typical power armor. So if there's a boss that you're struggling to learn or you need some damage reduction because it's, doing too much damage, then that is also a really nice tool that you can use for learning. It's not something that I would suggest you camp for most bosses because once you know what's going on, it's always better to have power armor do more damage. But I do think it's a really good tool to use while you're learning a boss because I know it's a controversial opinion, but it's really hard to learn if you're just constantly dying. So, in my opinion, step one is survive the kill. Step two, get good at the kill. Um, so that's kind of a pretty cool thing that Magic has access to. I will say in my opinion, the biggest negative or con about Magic is unlike the other styles, you really only have your sunshine where you're either in your sunshine or you're out of your sunshine. The other styles all have kind of multiple damage sources, like melee having Zerk and ZGS and EZK, ranged having Swiftness and ECB, and Necro having your Split Soul and Living Death. You don't necessarily have to stack all of those things, so you can use them for longer fights, for prolonged things. So that is kind of a negative that Mage, even if you have Fractured Staff of Armadyl, you just basically have inside and outside of your Sunshine, and there's not really any options. So there's that, but either way, that's kind of the overview of good and bads of Magic, and let's kind of get into my gear of the step one, super cheap when you're starting off, and a couple tricks and tips and things, and then we'll get into some rotations. So to start with the gear, as you can see, I'm just using subjugation armor. It's super cheap, it's power armor, it's augmentable, it doesn't degrade, so it's just a really good square one. I do have the Zuck cape. Mine is the hybrid, but you can get the singular style. I have a guide going over how to get normal mode Zuck with Necromancy. It's super easy. I 100% recommend it because it does make Omni Power pretty massive for all of your mage rotations. Kind of like the pinnacle, bread and butter, however you want to call it. I have the Blood Amulet of Fury because, again, it's just free healing, nice stats, it's cheap. I have a Wand of the Cyweir Elders, and you can also get a Cyweir Orb as well, but I just have the Port's Orb because it's free and I just happen to get it. I currently have it as a Chroming switch, but you obviously can just use it as your actual main offhand. I have the Ring of Death, I have my rune pouches, and I have Blast Diffusion Boots and Carapac Wraps. These are just really good power armor kind of gear. I absolutely suggest you use them, and I definitely suggest Carapac wrist wraps just because we'll get into it, but when I set up my Revolution bar, I have Dragon Breath and Combust, which, it makes your Combust do everything at once and more damage. It's just really nice, and again, they're really cheap. And then for a pocket slap, I'm just using a Book of Balance. It's the really cheap, the initial quest books. They're easy to get. You can obviously upgrade to any of the books that you want. Just use whatever you have access to. I have overloads, and then if you find yourself in a position where you can get your Essence of Finality, before you have your FSOA, you kind of really have two options. You can have your Ivan Staff, which is from a quest, or you can get the Gothic Staff, which is from Mage Arena. Both of them are very strong. If you're just starting out, I would suggest the Gothic Staff only because it's a little bit more flexible. It has a lower adren cost. It obviously does less damage than the Ivans, but due to the lower adren cost, you can kind of weave it in a lot easier. With that being said, that's kind of the whole overview. So next we're going to get into the action bar setup and specifically why I have mine set up the way I do, or why I did have it set up this way when I was learning, because when you're getting into Magic, typically 90% of the time, most everybody is going to be camping your Insight Fear spell, and that is for the reduced adrenaline cost on Tsunami, because having that crit buff is really, really awesome, especially during your Sunshine, especially if you happen to need adrenaline, so you can use something like Tendrils. So, most people just camp Insight Fear. However, if you have Exsanguinate, it is very, very strong. If you get all 12 stacks, it makes all of your basics do 12% more damage. Alternatively, because you're learning, you're just getting into it, you're probably not going to be actively paying attention to changing and spell swapping in the 12 stacks. Usually, if you do, you don't want to have Rack being auto-cast because it will consume the stacks and hit a lot harder, but again, it'll consume those stacks. But if it consumes them, it hits pretty hard, and since you're not looking to actively swap in a way where you'd only use Rack situationally, it's just kind of free extra damage, so you might as well while you're running, and then as you move on, you can decide how you want to change your bars, if you want to use it manually or not manually. So as you can see, the pinnacle of the rotation, and honestly the pinnacle of Mage, rotates around one thing, and that is Greater Concentrated Blast. So almost every single rotation, you just want to have it at the very front of your Revolution bar, just so it is casting as much as possible every third ability. Until you have the Fractured Staff of Armadyl, you're most likely not going to be caring for any kind of two-hand weapons. We're not going over four-tick auto-attacking, because again, this is step one getting into it. That is, if you know how to do that or plan to do that, then you are way beyond this guide. So we have our bars set up in this way because when you're doing your rotation, obviously you want to start with Sunshine, and then you want to go into Tsunami. So we're going to set autocast for Exsanguinate because we're going to look at it almost like your mid-rotation. And so when you have your target, the reason I have it set up like this, and because most people don't want to do the right click, the autocast, anything like that, you can click your Sunshine and then click that your Insight, and then as soon as you can do your Tsunami, you can click that, and then you can click Exsanguinate. And that's like the whole intro to your Sunshine rotation. And that's kind of the easy way to do spell swapping without actually having to do spell swapping. And you can then, from there, once you've actually started, you can then do your thresholds and actually approach your Sunshine rotation. But that's the reason why I have that set up. If you want to, you can obviously manually do that, and it goes much faster, because when you just click or hit the binding that you have for the spells, it actually takes a GCD. It acts that spell swap, doing it for you, acts as like an ability. So in that sense, it's almost a lost GCD for each of those. So it's 2 lost abilities, but the trade-off is the fact that you don't have to think of it quite as much. So even if you have them hotkeyed like they are here, if I just hit F1, you'll see my character stalls for GCD, and then I am now back on Insight Fear. So you absolutely can do this where you have it, and you need to make sure you have manual spellcasting in the settings changed, so that way it actually is changing the spell for you. It's not just treating it like another ability and casting it as a ability, as a firing it as an auto attack. So that's kind of step one. It's up to you if you want to do it this way, or if you want to manually do it, or if you just want to camp Insight Fear, that's also totally fine. There's no problem with that whatsoever. I just wanted to show that as kind of an option moving forward if you want to dip your toe into looking at possibly spell swapping like that. With that being said, we're going to, from here on, just camp Insight Fear, because I'm going to just show you basically there's only really 2 real rotations that we're going to look at, and that's your first Sunshine, where you have access to your Adrenaline Potion, and then there's your second Sunshine, where your Adrenaline Potion is on cooldown. In theory, you'd typically then use Limitless on your off cooldown Sunshine, but that's a very expensive ability right now, and I'm not going to use it because I don't want to assume you have it. So we are going to just start where we're going to use our sunshine and use our adrenaline potion, and then you can instantly tsunami, and then you're going to just build your basics, and you want to kind of, as quickly as you can, I like to fire off tendrils, and that is because everything is a guaranteed crit, so it's basically a 100% chance of getting full adrenaline. And then you can Omni Power, G-Conk, Wild Magic, Dragon Breath because it's stronger than G-Conk again, into something like a Deep Impact because it is a pretty strong ability when you're getting off. You can fully channel your Asphyxiate, and that's pretty much your whole sunshine right there. The only other option is if you want a sunshine and then tsunami and save your adrenaline pot for after the tsunami. You can, because of the cooldown duration being 20 seconds, you can, if you prioritize it, get 2 wild magics in 1 sunshine, which is pretty, pretty cool, pretty heavy hitting. Otherwise, you just kind of approach it where you have no adrenaline potion. You do almost the same exact thing. It would just take a little bit longer to get to that point. You wouldn't really be able to instantly do sunshine into tsunami, but you'd still then, same concept, build it. You have 26 seconds, so if you can get it with above 20 seconds left, you can do wild magic first, and then look into Omni Power, tendrils. You can let it channel. You can do a 2-hit asphyx, or you can just instantly cancel it, but if you're learning, just let it ride, let it do its thing. And then you can go in the back. You have 5 seconds left, so you can G-Conk into a wild magic again right at the end of your sunshine, and that's pretty much your whole rotation. So you're going to be, it's up to you how you want to approach it. If you would rather kind of save your adrenaline potion almost for like panic defensives outside of your sunshine, you certainly can. It's situational. It's really approach it whatever makes sense to you. And that's really the whole wrap of magic when you don't have your FSOA. And if you do have the FSOA, all you're really doing is you're doing sunshine, tsunami, and then you're doing the SAF spec immediately after, and then doing exactly the same thing of just prioritizing your thresholds, prioritizing your channeled abilities like tendrils, and nothing much changes besides for just adding the spec into that rotation. That being said, if you find yourself with an EOF, and we're going to assume you're starting with the Guthic Staff, the really cool part about the Guthic Staff and the fact that it is such a cheap weapon spec is when you're outside of your sunshine and you're kind of waiting for it to come back off cooldown, a really good thing to do is G-Conk, your Guthic Staff spec, and then another basic. And you can kind of rinse and repeat those 3 things of G-Conk, G-Staff, basic, G-Conk, G-Staff, basic, and you just repeat that process over and over until you've built back to 100% and your sunshine's back off cooldown, and then you can go into your next sunshine rotation. The reason you want to do that and prioritize that is because G-Conk has a crit chance increase for the next ability afterwards, and it's the G-Staff being a cheap threshold with no cooldown and a pretty strong hit means that you can kind of boost that every single time, and it's just a good way to keep the damage pretty solid outside of your sunshine. If you have an Ivan Staff, you can use that, but just know that the Ivan Staff takes way more adrenaline than the G-Staff takes. As you can see, it's a 45% compared to like a 20%. So that's why I suggest using the Guthic Staff first, because again, with that lower adrenaline cost, it's just a lot easier to weave in and out of fights. So that's the whole overview of magic rotations, and now I'm just going to do a few kills again at Vindicta to show you this exact setup, the exact gear. I'll do a kill with and a kill without the Guthic Staff, just so you can see it and kind of gauge that damage in action in an actual encounter. So hopefully this helps you just kind of approach the magic style, and best of luck.